There is a moment many people reach where seeking no longer feels satisfying. You have read, practiced, searched, and yet something deeper is quietly asking to be remembered rather than achieved. Today's conversation isn't about adding another layer of understanding, it's about awakening to what's already here. Welcome to I Awaken, a space for conscious inquiry, inner remembrance, and conversations that invite us beyond the surface of the mind into deeper truth. I am Archita, and my guest today is Dean Gates, a spiritual teacher, author, and podcaster with over 25 years of experience in meditation and mindfulness, and the host of this very show. Through his books, workshops, and teachings, Dean has guided countless individuals towards self healing and expanded awareness. Today, we are exploring enlightenment not as an abstract idea, but as a lived human experience and what it truly means to awaken. So, welcome to I Awaken, Dean. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I appreciate your kind offer to participate in your show.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine and definitely the listeners. And so, Dean, before we talk about enlightenment as a concept, I'm curious, when did the question of awakening first become something personal for you rather than philosophical?
Well, um, for me, it was a topic that was approached in my early 20s as part of my academic training, but it was approached from a philosophical standpoint, which really was a detached point of view. In other words, I was trying to intellectually understand it. And then life happened, and that became not a primary issue with me. I lived what would be considered a conventional um, life until about my 50th year. And in around my 50th year, um, my awareness, um, I would say, turned on. And I became aware that all of the things that I had been doing, all the stuff that I had been doing that was deemed to be successful by conventional means was not actually making me happier. And so consequently, that is an illustration of what awakening is. And we are designed to have that experience um, if we are willing to have that experience. An awakening is nothing more than that point of realization that all the things that you've been doing in your lifetime may have provided you with relative success, but happiness is missing. And happiness is actually the measure of how we are doing in our evolutionary process, which is synonymous with the enlightenment process. So everyone is enlightened to the degree that they have allowed themselves to become enlightened. There's no one that is not on the enlightenment path, but you either know that you are or you don't know that you are, and that is a statement of conditioning of either before acknowledging and accepting the responsibility for your advancement along the enlightenment path, or the confirmation that you are still in a state of what I consider to be or call the state of chaos, where we have not yet had enough awareness properly used in order to assume responsibility for our own participation in creation. There is a specific design to the nature of our experiences, and the design is encapsulated in an archetypical mind, which we all function according to this archetypical mind. The archetypical mind is nothing more than a blueprint for how we process thought. in this range. We exist within a range of consciousness. We begin every lifetime um, at the level of progression that our metaphysical self has made to this point in time in the evolutionary process. In other words, we exist simultaneously in both the metaphysical world and the physical world. We in the physical world are an analog projection of our metaphysical self. Our metaphysical self is a consciousness pattern, which is not at all physical as we perceive ourselves to be physical, but it is the collecting point for all of the uh, information and advancement that we achieve in our multitude of reincarnations. We begin at the condition of our metaphysical self with each new lifetime, with each new incarnation. So if we have cumulatively made significant progress, that's where we will begin each new lifetime. But we still begin with um, a relative condition of primordial darkness. In other words, we don't get to remember all of those things that we learned. We don't get to have the clarity that we may or may not have in our metaphysical self. The archetypical mind dictates that we will create a false perception of self that you can call an identity. You can call it a hierophant, which is just a fancy word for saying a false perception of self, or more popularly, you can call it an ego. And they're all the same thing. There's no distinction between those labels other than the labels themselves. But by virtue of having experiences, we create expectations, and we also create a multitude of beliefs. And this identity, even though it is our perception of self, it's who we think we are, is nothing more than a bundle of beliefs that we have assimilated either by osmosis from the people in our environment or that we willingly um, contribute or add to the ego, to the identity. It is always a false perception of self. We always have an authentic self that is lying underneath that false perception of self. When we have an awakening, then what we are actually doing is employing the natural awareness that we all inherently have while we are developing and promoting this identity. Our awareness is pointed outside of ourselves because the purpose of the identity is to garner more of what we like. We're all motivated to get more of what we like, regardless of what that is. And in order to make the identity effective, we have to observe and be aware of our surroundings and the people that we're interacting with, so that we can watch their reactions to us. And if their reactions are positive and we get more what we like, then we like to keep those beliefs as part of our identity. If we don't like the reactions that we're getting, we're not successful in getting more of what we like, that is called stress in and of itself. And stress is a spectrum. It begins with very minor irritations all the way up to those experiences that we would deem to be traumatic. Those are everything that we interpret as not liking is a reflection of stress, and it is actually our teacher because it provides us with the opportunity to become aware of what aspect of our identity that we have created that we don't like, that is not serving us to advance ourselves along the enlightenment path. So while we remain under the spell of this aspect of the archetypical mind, we will experience a lot of what we don't like, because you have to know what you don't like in order to know what you do like when you encounter it. And so people often spend their entire and multiple lifetimes experiencing only or primarily what they don't like, with only a hint of what they do like. It is when we have this awakening that we are able, and in what the awakening is, it is the inversion of that same awareness that heretofore has been pointed outside of us turns around, and we begin to point that inside and become aware of what it is that we have incorporated into this false perception of self, this identity that is perpetuating our stress and our suffering and our dislike. That um, process of inverting that awareness allows us to begin to assume responsibility for our participation in creation, number one, but it also allows us to begin to affect healing within ourselves. We are magnetic. We attract the types of experiences that we need in order to learn the curriculum of this range of consciousness and advance along the enlightenment path.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put it, Nadine. But, you know, I mean, it totally makes sense, but also a lot to take in. But I get it. I mean, I think that a lot of us are already in the path of enlightenment, but we just don't realize that we are. And I think awakening is where it helps us to realize that truth. And but a lot of people also have many misconceptions about enlightenment, and as did I. Many people imagine enlightenment as a permanent state of bliss or transcendence. From your experience, what do we often get wrong about what enlightenment actually is?
Well, look at the name, and it implies light. Enlightenment implies that some aspect of light is involved in the process. Light is information, and light tells, instructs energy how to be. So we are energy. Everything that we encounter is energy. Our um, exposure to and accumulation of light instructs our energy being how to be. And so we are surrendering distortions by following the enlightenment path. All those distortions of perception of who we are, what is important, so on and so forth. So enlightenment, the enlightenment path is the path of surrendering false perceptions of self, which are all distortions of our authentic self. And it provides us with the opportunity for a vast range of experience types. But that notwithstanding, how we select out of that infinite range of potential experience interpretations is incumbent upon our awareness and our inwardly directed awareness to be um, knowledgeable about what it is that we need to actually advance ourselves along this path. But that requires us to begin to understand awareness in and of itself. Awareness is um, is an inherent characteristic of the one infinite creator, and it is the platform inherent characteristic that allows us to advance and experience the hierarchical future aspects of the creator, which we are. They are inherently part of our authentic self. We cannot not be these same inherent characteristics of the one infinite creator. But while we remain focused on developing this false perception of self, we are not able to experience our inherent creatorness. And so, consequently, we're perpetuating our stress and we're perpetuating our suffering.
Yeah, that reframing, it feels grounding. Enlightenment not as escape from humanity, but a deeper intimacy with it. So definitely, let's stay with that for a moment. So, Dean, what inner patterns or conditioning tend to keep people circling enlightenment rather than resting into it?
Well, surrendering the distortions of perception means surrendering this perception of self, and this perception of self is who we perceive that we are. It's who we think we are, and so consequently, surrendering that is scary because if I'm not who I think I am, then who am I? And in the course of this surrendering, of this awakening, as we're referring to it, there is a period of a void of knowingness because you're transitioning from a false perception of self essentially to a more authentic perception of self. But that authentic perception of self has been hidden from us, not by anybody but ourselves. In other words, we've been our own deceiver as to who is our authentic self. And so that transition in our perception creates a period of darkness or a period of void where we don't have a clear perception of who we are. But as we continue the process predicated upon faith, then we achieve success and we also achieve greater happiness. And because happiness is our measure of how we're doing. And understanding the distinction between having hope and having or being in a condition of faith is an important point to understand. Hope transitions to faith. We have hope as, again, a natural part of our perception, our beingness. And an example of how hope transitions to faith, assume that you have a job and you lose your job and you know that you have to get another job. You have to rework, you have to replace yourself as a source of sustenance provision. And so you go and you start knocking on company doors, not knowing whether they have a job available or not. So you have hope that they have a job that you can apply for. So you knock on one door and they acknowledge, yes, we have an opening available, and they interview you for the job, and then they call you back for another interview, and then they call you back for a third interview. Before you knocked on the door the first time, you had hope, but you didn't really have any faith, but you gained information because yes, they have a job. You've gotten that information. They interviewed you. So yes, they have an interest in you. The second time, yes, they have even more interest in you. And by the third interview, yes, you know that they're interested in you to fill this position. And you have faith because of the information you've gained through this process that there's a high probability that you're going to be soon going to be employed with this company. The process of progressing along the enlightenment path follows that same structure. Before you know anything about anything other than that you're not happy with that enlightenment step, but you still have hope that you can find that happiness by virtue of getting additional information. But it is still incumbent upon you to undertake the steps to have the types of experiences that will provide you with that faith to fill that empty void of darkness that you don't know how to deal with when you first have the awakening. And so the farther that you go down the path, the more information that you have, the deeper and the greater the faith that you have, not in circumstances that may be haphazard, but you have more confidence in your abilities as a participant in creation to achieve these levels of greater happiness, greater healing, and greater awareness.
That makes so much sense. I mean, you started off with surrendering, right? And I think that's definitely true. I think surrendering the false perception of oneself is the very first step towards enlightenment. And I think, yeah, it's very true. It's powerful to hear how the very drive to become more spiritual can sometimes be the thing that obscures awakening. So, moving on, Dean, how does awakening or the absence of it show up in everyday life, not in mystical moments, but in relationships, work, or emotional reactions, according to you?
The more that we progress along the enlightened path, the more that our authentic self is exposed as our real self. That's why we called it an authentic self. And the more this false perception of self diminishes. And in that process, is a significant feeling of comfort in who your authentic self is, which allows significant humility to be part of your experience. That you have gratitude for the experiences that the village, which is simply what I call the workaday world of our experience, um, for bringing you the opportunity to, through experience, to further your advancement along the enlightenment path. And we begin to cease to interpret experiences as being stressful or not stressful. That essentially is what is happening when we become mindful. Mindfulness is an often misunderstood part of the process, and one of the reasons that I tout the benefits of meditation so significantly is meditation allows us to really seriously invert that awareness inside of us. That's the purpose of meditation. When we meditate, the deeper that we go, the deeper we're going inside of us and exploring ourselves, which is our purpose for participating in creation. That's like a vacation, and after our vacation is over, on a day that which we hopefully visit on a daily basis, we have to come back into the village. We have to come back into our workaday world. The development of our awareness along which carries us along the enlightenment path allows us to eventually take the mindset of inwardly directed awareness from the guru's cave, which was where we are when we're in the meditation state, with us back into the village. All problems exist in the village. No problems exist in the guru's cave. But when you take that mindset, that inwardly directed awareness, with you back into the village, then you're not part of the problems, you're an observer of the problems. And so your reactions to what heretofore have been significant stressors become simply experiences that are bringing you the opportunity to learn more, to experience through additional experiences, and propel yourself even farther along the enlightenment path. And so, what has filled that gap between stress and no stress is happiness. And so, even with the same problems existing before you achieve this degree of awareness, you no longer see them as stressful problems, but they become your teacher. They begin to become your intensified guide, and so you explore each experience more deeply because each the same experiences, the same types of experiences, the depth and breadth of the um, uh, learning that they provide you with, the education that they provide you with becomes more significant, more intense, and so you achieve greater happiness by doing essentially the same things but with a different mindset.
Yeah, that's so true. And what stands out is how enlightenment expresses itself quietly in the small moments through presence, honesty, and a softened relationship with life. So thank you for sharing that, Dean, and everything that you've shared today. I think it resonates with me, and I think that it definitely resonates with a lot of our listeners. And yeah, for anyone listening who feels they are still searching, I'll offer this question: what if enlightenment isn't something you reach, but something you stop resisting? Enlightenment is less about becoming awakened and more about remembering what has always been aware. And Dean, for listeners who want to explore your teachings, books, or podcasts more deeply, where can they connect you?
Well, I have a webcast, which I think we're all required to have in these days and times, that is addressed at the initial D, Dean, Dean, Graves, Graves, all one word, no spaces or punctuation, at or Dean Graves at org at dot. I'm confusing my words. I apologize. ddeangraves.org, O-R-G. And I have access and links to all the podcasts that I maintain, all the books that I have available, also contact information and other services that I offer to expedite healing of traumas and the stressors and the other conditions that we assume to be part of our experience.
Great. So I'll have all the details on my show listing, and the listeners are free to reach out to you whenever and however they want. Thank you for spending time this with Thank you for spending this time with us on I Awaken. If today stirred something within you, let it settle gently. No need to grasp or define it. Until next time, may your path be less about seeking answers and more about resting in awareness. Wishing you all a very happy new year.